How did ordinary, completely harmless water carve out the massive 2 billion-year-old Grand Canyon? We usually think of solid rock as practically invincible, right? But the truth is, rock is actually ever so slightly soluble. Over billions of years, the Colorado River didn't just physically push dirt around. It slowly and methodically dissolved the rock through chemical reactions. And to understand massive, earth-shaping events like this, we first have to understand the microscopic language of how matter interacts.
That brings us to the absolute foundation of all chemical changes. Whether it's a river dissolving a canyon, an engine burning fuel, or your own body digesting breakfast right now, it all comes down to molecules rearranging themselves. But how do we track that? How do we prove that no matter is lost in the process? We do it by writing and balancing chemical equations. By the end of this explainer, you are going to master the fundamental grammar of a chemical equation, the exact mathematical rules for balancing them so they obey the laws of physics, and exactly how to strip away the noise to find the true underlying net ionic reaction.
Okay, Section 1, Anatomy of a Chemical Equation. Before we can do any math, we need to know how to read the language of chemistry, specifically our reactants and products. Let's dive right in. Think of a chemical equation just like a recipe for baking a cake. On the left side of the arrow, we have our ingredients. In chemistry, we call these the reactants. These are the substances that are about to undergo a change. On the right side of the arrow, we have our finished cake, the products. The arrow itself just means yields or produces. Now, this brilliantly illustrates the combustion of methane. One methane molecule reacts with diatomic oxygen to yield carbon dioxide and water. But you'll notice there are some big numbers floating in front of those formulas.
See those big numbers? Those are called coefficients. A coefficient tells us the relative amount of a reactant or product. If there's no number there, we just assume it's a 1. What's really interesting here is that these coefficients are just ratios. You can read this as 1 molecule of methane reacts with 2 molecules of oxygen. Or you could say 1 dozen methanes react with 2 dozen oxygens. Or even 1 mole reacts with 2 moles. It's exactly like doubling or tripling a recipe. These numbers are our main tool for balancing the chemical scales.
Now you might be wondering, if we just need the same number of atoms on both sides of our equation, can't we just change the tiny numbers at the bottom of the letters? For example, if I need more oxygen on the right side, can I just magically change water, H2O, into H2O2?
Wait, this is absolutely crucial. The answer is a massive no. You can change coefficients, the big numbers in front, but you must never, ever change the subscripts. The subscripts define the actual identity of the molecule. I mean, H2O is water, which you drink. H2O2 is hydrogen peroxide, which you absolutely should not drink. Changing the subscript means you aren't balancing an equation anymore. You are inventing an entirely different chemical reaction.
All right, Section 2, Balancing the Chemical Scales. Now that we understand the basic grammar, let's move to the math and see how the conservation of matter actually works in practice.
Let's look at the decomposition of water. Step 1, we write out our unbalanced equation. H2O yields H2 plus O2. Right away, we see a problem. We have 1 oxygen on the left, but 2 on the right. Matter cannot be magically created out of thin air. So, step 2, we put a coefficient of 2 in front of the water on the left. Boom, now we have 2 oxygens on both sides. Perfect. But wait, that 2 also multiplied our hydrogen. Now we've got 4 hydrogens on the left and only 2 on the right. No problem. Step 3, we just cascade that adjustment by putting a 2 in front of the H2 product. If we map this out on a simple table, we can easily verify our work. Element by element, we multiply the big coefficient by the little subscript. 4 hydrogens on the left, 4 on the right. 2 oxygens on the left, 2 on the right. Everything equals out perfectly. This proves that our balanced equation completely obeys the law of conservation of matter. We literally didn't lose a single atom.
Moving on to Section 3, How ions behave in water. Let's shift gears for a second and look closer at what happens when we drop these compounds into water. Given the sheer abundance of water on Earth, a huge number of chemical reactions take place in these aqueous environments.
When sugar dissolves in water, the sugar molecules just drift apart from one another, but stay entirely intact. But ionic compounds, like salt, do something completely different. Back in 1884, a Swedish chemist named Svante August Arrhenius proposed a really radical idea for his PhD dissertation. He claimed that when ionic compounds dissolve, the ions physically separate from each other. His examination team actually had a really hard time believing this. They gave him a barely passing grade. But guess what? Years later, this exact same work won him the Nobel Prize in chemistry. What Arrhenius discovered is a process called dissociation. When you put sodium chloride, ordinary table salt, into water, the water molecules surround the solid crystal and literally pull it apart. The sodium ion and the chloride ion get a divorce. They go their completely separate ways in the solution, floating around independently with their respective electrical charges.
To keep track of all this in our chemical equations, we use phase labels, those little letters in parentheses next to the formulas. And S means solid, L is liquid, and G is gas. But the absolute star of the show here is AQ, which stands for aqueous. Whenever you see AQ, it means that substance is dissolved in water. And if it's an ionic compound with an AQ label, it means those ions have completely dissociated and are freely swimming around.
Which brings us to section 4, finding the net equation. Now let's strip away the noise and find the true chemical change. You see, when we mix two aqueous solutions together, sometimes a brand new solid forms. But writing out the standard equation doesn't always tell the whole story. Take a look at the molecular equation first. It shows aqueous calcium chloride and aqueous silver nitrate reacting to form solid silver chloride and aqueous calcium nitrate. It looks nice and tidy, right? But remember what Arrhenius taught us. Those aqueous compounds aren't actually stuck together in the water. They're dissociated. So a much more realistic way to write this is the complete ionic equation, where every aqueous compound is broken apart into its individual floating ions. But if you look really closely at that complete ionic equation, you'll notice something funny. Some of the ions look exactly the same on the left side of the arrow as they do on the right side. They didn't do anything. We call these spectator ions, literally just like fans sitting in the bleachers at a basketball game. They are present in the arena, they're required to balance the overall electrical charge, but they don't actually participate in the action on the court.
And because they don't change, we can treat them like identical variables on both sides of an algebra equation. We just cross them out. Step 1, write out all the separated ions. Step 2, cross out the spectator ions, in this case the calcium and the nitrate ions. Step 3, write down whatever is left over. What you are left with is called the net ionic equation. In our example, it simply shows aqueous chloride ions reacting with aqueous silver ions to form solid silver chloride.
Okay, quick retention check here. Why do we go through all this trouble to cross out spectators and write a net ionic equation? Why does this specific format matter so much to chemists? Here's the punchline. The net ionic equation reveals the exact isolated chemical event that is taking place, completely regardless of where the ions came from. It honestly didn't matter that the chloride came from calcium chloride or that the silver came from silver nitrate. If you have dissolved silver and dissolved chloride in the same water, they will find each other and form a solid. Stripping away the spectators gives us the purest truth of the reaction.
Section 5. Key takeaways. Before we finish up, let's rapid-fire summarize the main points we've tackled in this explainer. Number 1. Chemical equations are recipes showing reactants turning into products. Number 2. To balance the scales of matter, we change the big coefficients in front, never ever the little subscripts that define the chemical's identity. Number 3. Ionic compounds dissociate or physically separate when they dissolve in aqueous solutions. And number 4. By crossing out the inactive spectator ions, we can find the net ionic equation, which shows us the true chemical change.
Let me leave you with one final, real-world thought. We talked earlier about how water dissolving rock carved the Grand Canyon over billions of years. But precipitation, the exact reverse of dissolving, where solid matter suddenly forms out of liquid, might be happening in your home right now. Calcium carbonate is an unusual ionic compound. It's actually less soluble in hot water than in cold. When your water heater turns on, the dissolved calcium ions and carbonate ions react, drop out of the aqueous phase, and form solid limescale inside your pipes. This exact chemistry is why water heaters break down and pipes get clogged. So next time you take a hot shower, ask yourself, what invisible chemical equations are balancing themselves inside your plumbing right now?